Hello, this is April with inkycreationswithapril.com. Thanks for stopping by. Please make sure to give this video a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and click that notification bell. Today I'm going to show you these 3 cards that I created using the January 2023 card kit from Simon Says Stamp. Let's take a quick look at what's comes in the card kit. Comes with this great mesh bag, which is perfect for projects. I use them for projects on the go. Comes with this stamp pad, watercolor brush, some glossy accents, which I desperately needed. And it does have an envelope, and there is a small envelope in there as well. I find that in a minute. This beautiful snowflake, it's called the Aiden snowflake. There is some foamed snowflakes as well, some deco sheets from Tim Holtz, and a piece of glitter cardstock, as well as a pack of color blend cardstock from Simon, and this great 6x8 stamp set called Snow Love. I believe there's coordinating dies for it as well. There's also these little metal gems, and there was that small gift card envelope. There is a piece of brushed silver cardstock, as well as 3 pieces of 110-pound Nina White cardstock. So today I'm going to share with you 3 cards that I used making this kit. I tend to get kits and monthly subscriptions, and they sit in the boxes, or in this case, the bags, waiting for me to use them. So this year my goal is to use them when I get them and share those ideas either here on YouTube, on my blog, and on social media to help inspire you to get those kits out and use them. So I'm going to stick with a color palette here, but this is the beautiful colors that come in that color blend cardstock pack, and I'm going to use the one that matches the ink pad that's included. And I love this. This cardstock's really awesome. It's a great weight. Die cuts beautifully. It is slick. So remember that when you're stamping or gluing stuff on it, that it is easy for things to move around. So I am not going to trim this down, but we are going to take some of the deco sheet here. I'm going to use the one in silver, and this is really thin. So it got an adhesive on the back. I peeled that off and I put it on a piece of that 110-pound cardstock that came in the kit. And I'm going to die cut from this. I just felt it was way too thin to die cut from. It made those little snowflakes really fragile. I like working with it much better once I've adhered it to a piece of cardstock like this. And it cut beautifully the first time. This is a beautiful snowflake. I love snowflakes. Who doesn't? But do I like living and being in the snow? Not so much. Moved from that, and now I'm down here where I can wear shorts almost year round down in Texas. But I still love snowflakes, and will use them every chance I can get. So I decided to cut 3 of these for my card, and these little pieces, I just used a craft pick, and they popped right out really fast. And once I have those done, I am going to grab the stamp set here. After I kind of see where I want to place my snowflakes, I'm going to grab the stamp set, and I really meant to use that longer sentiment that says sending so much love, but I grabbed the so much thanks, and I do use it twice. I wasn't thinking, I was just grabbing, but I love that so much thanks. I think it's perfect for like cards to send out from gifts that you received from the holidays. So love the snowflakes that's in this 6x8 stamp set. These stamp sets are always really big, and they always have really wonderful sentiments included in them. I think Christina Warner may have designed this stamp set and this Aiden snowflake, and she does such a great job. And I do think there's coordinating die cuts that you can get separately. I don't know if I'll get those or not, but always love that that's usually an option. So I'm just going to emboss this. I always stamp it twice, wiping off in between, because any ink will pick up some of that anti-static powder that I always use to prep my cardstock. So I want a nice clear image. So I just wipe it off in between my 2 stamps so I get a nice great image when I emboss it. I do always clean my stamps, and I do put them away so they do not get stuck to something they shouldn't be stuck to never be found again. And or found later, and I have no idea which stamp set it went in. So I'm using my new Wow embossing tool. I got this embossing heat tool for Christmas from my daughter. My other one was a good 18 years old, so it's nice to have something new. I'm gonna take and back this sentiment once I trim it down with the silver glitter cardstock that came in my kit. I do think that glitter cardstock may vary from kit to kit. I just happened to get silver and it worked perfect for this card. And I love the guillotine trimmer. I think it makes making sentiments pretty easy. And I usually just eyeball it. I know there's some tricks to make it more exact, but if I can, I just eyeball it. I'm going to pick that up with a pair of reverse tweezers. Those are from Cat Scrappiness. And I am just going to lay this on that full sheet of glitter cardstock. And I just put my edge around those two corners there, those two sides, sorry. And I'm letting that kind of set. And then I'm going to take that over to my guillotine and just trim off those other two sides. I find this is a really great way to do sentiments rather than try to measure and figure out how big we need. You could have also used sentiment strips if you had some that layer up nicely. So I am working on my Glassboard Studios media or craft mat, sorry. It is magnetic. So I just put some magnets on my sentiment there to hold them together while that glue adhered got a little stronger. I love the glass mat. I prefer to work on glass mats, and I love this one from Glassboard Studios. I do have a 20% off code. You can find that in the description below. It's like I said, it's magnetized, and I love it. And they do have black, but I prefer working on white so I can see where my ink is. So I put some foam squares on the back of my sentiment. And now I'm just using my little T ruler to get it all nice and straight. I do try to use my T ruler as much as I can because I am not super great about putting sentiments on perfectly straight. So this is how I do most of my sentiments, and usually when I'm in a hurry and I don't reach for my T ruler, I end up putting them on crooked and have to try to peel that off or figure out how to just make it work when it's not perfectly straight. So I think this little T ruler is an excellent addition to any card maker. So something I found out while I was gluing this is because this color blend cardstock is so slick, you want to go lightly with the glue. Even though this glue dries clear and you don't actually see it in the end, I think less is better for these little snowflaked images. So I suggest you take, when you put the glue on, take it over to a piece of scratch paper and just lightly tap that the back of that snowflake on that paper to get off any big huge clumps of glue you may have gotten on there. Then put it on this background panel, and that just stops glue from oozing up around this delicate image. And I think this is a great tip to use for any delicate image, but especially when you're using it on something shiny or slick where you tend to see a liquid adhesive a little bit more. This works great. Also, it would work great on alcohol inked backgrounds because when the glue oozes out, it can change the color of your alcohol ink a little bit. So I'm going to put something heavy on these little snowflakes very carefully and let those dry. I'm going to flip my panel over using some longer scissors. I'm just going to trim off any of those little ends of those snowflakes that stick over my panel. And then I'm just going to mount this to a heavyweight side folding card base. I get these from Simon Says Stamp. They come pre-cut, pre-scored. It saves me a ton of time. It does cost a little more than if you were to do it yourself, but to me it's a huge time saver. I can be making cards instead of cutting and scoring. And I love the weight of them. I think they're 120 pound and they're really heavy, and I just love how the finished card feels with these card bases. So I decided I needed a little bit of bling. So I grabbed some iridescent drops from Pink Fresh Studio. I'm just taking an embellishment tool and I'm gonna put these in the center of those 3 snowflakes. I used the largest drops that they had for this. And then I'm just gonna kind of fiddle around and, like I always do, take way too much time trying to decide where I want to put my little embellishments. You will see I put them down, I move them here and there. Do I want them symmetrical? Do I want them all different? Each day changes, but I tend to be a symmetrical person. Throws me for a loop when I don't do that, but I just kind of put them down and try to see what pleases my eye. So you'll see I'm just kind of moving them around. I wished I was one of those people that could just put the glue down and know that that's where I want my embellishments to go. So envy those crafters. But for me, I can't do it because I know I'm going to move those embellishments and more than once probably. So, and please excuse me, it is always allergy season down in Texas. Been here almost a year and had allergies year round, where back where we moved from, I didn't have them very often. I think it's currently cedar season, and the allergies are definitely bigger down here in Texas. So sorry for if I'm sniffling a little bit and have a little bit of a cough. I think I'm going to have to go see an allergist and see if we can get these allergies under control a little bit more. So I'm just gluing those final little drops into place, and see there, I decided I didn't need a couple of those. So this is why I do not put my glue down first. I put all of my embellishments in place first. So we're just going to set that aside and let that dry. Put these back in, and this little funnel tray is from Cat Scrappiness, and I love it. It works great, especially if you're putting your embellishments back into a little baggie like I was. Works great. So for my second card, I did grab a piece of Distress Watercolor cardstock from Ranger. I smooshed my ink pad down on my glass surface, sprayed it with a sprayer, and I just did some basic ink smooshing. Love ink smooshing. Gets me nice and inky because I am not clean about it. And I love the texture that the card panel has when it dries. So I do suggest just to set the panel aside and let it dry on its own. I was in a hurry, so I used my embossing tool. This embossing tool does have 2 speeds. So the lower one puts out a lot less air and is great for drying these panels like this. A heated tool from Ranger would work as well. So I am just taking a baby wipe and then just some water and my microfiber cloth and cleaning my glass mat. They clean up so fast. Now I'm just going to add some little water splatters using my Distress sprayer. I wanted big ones, so I was very careful about pulling the trigger on my Distress sprayer, so I got bigger droplets, and then just soaked up the extra with my microfiber cloth, and love the texture that has on that background. So now we're going to take this beautiful heart image with the snowflakes in it that are in this set, and we're going to stamp this on vellum. Got this idea from watching a Christina Warner video. She gave some really great hints and I loved it. So I'm going to share those here because I found they worked great. So it's always great to hear something, hear a tip, see if it works, and then share it with others to let them know, well, it worked for me, that's for sure. So using some vellum, going to prep that cardstock because we are going to emboss on it. And I am having a hard time getting embossing powder out of that particular anti-static powder tool, so I will grab a different one here in a minute that puts out a good amount of powder. So again, I'm stamping it twice, wiping in between, because whenever you stamp that first time, it's going to pick up some of that ink. So I'm using some Simon Says Stamp Ultra Fine Silver Embossing Powder for these images. We'll be using it on our background panel as well here in a minute. I'm going to clean my stamp. I know some people, when they use a clear embossing ink, like I used the one from Simon Says Stamp today, I know some people just put them away with that on it. I clean them no matter what. I just like them nice and squeaky clean. So sorry I'm off screen here. I was just trying to make sure that all the embossing powder melted. And so I have that, and I'm going to set that aside for just a minute while we go ahead and cut out this background panel. I am just using the diagonal stitched rectangles from Pink Fresh Studio. This is one of my go-tos for a great background panel. It adds just some really beautiful stitching. You cannot really see it in the video, but in real life, it just adds a beautiful little detail right around that panel. I just took that over, ran it through my Gemini Junior. So now I am really trying to make sure this panel is really dry. I put some anti-static powder on it. I am pouring on some of my embossing powder to make sure it all comes off that panel nicely before I go ahead and stamp on it. If it would have held on to some of that embossing powder, it means the panel's still too wet. So you're going to want to continue to let that dry, or put a heat tool to it to make sure it's dry, so your embossing powder only sticks where you stamp it and where you want it. So I am actually using one of the Misty sticky mats to hold my panel in place here, because I'm going to stamp off the edges a little bit, and these sticky mats hold your panel right into place. You don't have to worry about it moving. Just make sure it's tucked down in that corner each time. And if you need to double stamp, you can. So I'm using some of the smaller snowflakes from the set. I'm just going to take those and go ahead and stamp those in the clear embossing ink from Simon Says Stamp, and sprinkle on some of that silver embossing powder, and go ahead and heat set that. So I could have added a few more of the snowflakes, but I kind of wanted that heart to be what shines on this card. So I do go back and stamp all these snowflakes in different areas a second time, just to fill it in a little bit. I did make sure that I knew where I wanted my main focal image to go, and that's that heart. I did make sure that I knew where I wanted that to go, so I wasn't stamping snowflakes underneath it, so I knew I didn't need anything in the middle. So there I am. I'm just making sure it's really stuck down to that Misty sticky mat. I have found that the sticky mats, Misty makes a pack. I got a pack of 3 when I ordered my new Misty, the teal one here, because it's one of my favorite colors. Brutus Monroe makes one. I do find they clean pretty well. Just take a baby wipe or something wet to them. And if you get some like anti-static powder on it, if you just really take and wipe that off really well, they tend to just go back to being nice and sticky. So I love them. They come in handy. I have several of them. You can actually ink blend using these to help hold your cardstock in place too, if you like to do that. But I use the magnets that are come with my glass craft mat, and that's how I ink blend. I used to ink blend on the Wendy Vecchi Make Art Station, but now that I have an all-in-one mat, I love that I can use it. So the only problem with this white mat versus the black mat for videos is you can see a couple of my lights. have to have those lights though to make my video as bright as possible. I do know a lot of people like to watch videos on the black, but this is what I create on, and this is what I prefer to create on, and I want to share that with you, that this is a surface I like and why I like it. I like it that I can't ruin a panel as easily with this, because I have a tendency to take the lid off of like my obsidian black ink from Altenew and put it down with the edges around it right on my work surface, and it leaves a nice little rectangular black image. And I have put way too many panels in that when I worked on black because I couldn't see it, and I ruined them. So I can see everything that's on my work surface. So now we're going to go back and grab that vellum heart that we embossed. You see I have two panels of it. I'm going to take a little bit of liquid adhesive and I'm going to put behind that heart. I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to rub it evenly over that image. And then I'm going to layer this second piece of vellum on it. Because I smeared that adhesive all over the back of that heart image, when it dries, you can't see it. And this makes the vellum much thicker. I was using thick vellum to begin with, but this makes it much thicker and a little less translucent, so you can not see through it quite as well, but you still get that wonderful vellum effect. So I'm just fussy cutting using a very small pair of Tim Holtz scissors. These did come in a past card kit, so that is one thing I love about Simon Says Stamp card kits, is you get fun things like scissors, ink pads, glossy accents, markers. They change it up each month, but I do love all these little things they include, because these scissors that I probably got a couple years ago in a card kit, I use every time I make a card. So I'm just using some little foam squares. I'm going to put those behind those embossed images, and in the finished project you can't really even see where I put them, especially since my panel has some ink splatters in it, or sorry, some water splatters, and is not a solid color. When you look through the vellum, you can't even see the foam squares, because vellum can be tricky hiding our things like foam squares and stuff. So this works pretty well. So I'm going to put this in the middle of that panel, and then we're going to need a great little sentiment for it. And this set has a ton of sentiments, and they have a lot of winter sentiments and thank you sentiments that are geared for wintertime. So I think this is great if you happen to have a winter birthday and you need to send a thank you, or you've had attended maybe a winter holiday party. This would be great for those. And also, we need to send thank yous for those gifts we received at Christmas, and these sentiments would be perfect for that. So this is where I'm trying to decide which sentiment I want. And there's two different styles of sentiments in this set. So I decided to go, instead of just the long sentiment where all the letters were the same height, I decided to go with the sentiments that had a little bit of scripty word included in it. So I just grabbed a scratch piece of black cardstock. So this is probably either Spellbinder's Onyx black ink, Altenew's jet black ink, or Hero Art's pitch black ink. Those are my three go-to colors for black paper cardstock. And whenever I stamp on white or black cardstock and I have a little extra left over, I just have a drawer right next to me that I just put all those little scraps of paper in, and I can use those for sentiments. Or if I want to cut multiple layers of dies and layer them up, I can use those little scratch papers. For my other colored cardstock, I put those back in. I have little job ticket holders that I put all my colored cardstocks in, and I just put all my little tiny scrap pieces of those colors back in their proper envelope. So I again emboss this with the silver embossing ink from Simon. I used the nested banners die set from Simon to cut out my sentiment, excuse my head here. And then I took a piece of fun foam that has score tape on the front and the back of that. That's what I like to use when I'm popping up an entire panel. I put that behind this ink smush panel and mounted that on a side fold heavyweight card base from Simon. So here I am grabbing that nested banner die and going to cut out this sentiment. It just happened to fit perfectly. I have a couple go-to sentiment dies, and this is one of them, and the other one is the featured sentiment die set from Altenew. So I'm just going to use my little mini Blossom. He sits on my desk all the time, and I use it for cutting out small sentiment strips and word dies. Works perfect for it. Don't have to get up, go over, turn on the Gemini, run it through that. And I find that the plates with this mini Blossom don't warp. They're just going to need to be replaced because I've used them so much, but I've had these plates since, I don't know, for maybe 6 months now, and they have not warped whatsoever. So I'm just going to place my sentiment right on my vellum heart, and I decided to place it a little lower than right in the middle, so it's down on the very bottom of that heart, but I think it looks great. And card 2 is now done. So for our next and final card, I trimmed down a piece of the 110-pound cardstock that came in the kit. I trimmed it down to an A2 panel, so that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And now I just grabbed a blending brush from Simon from my stash, and I'm going to take that ink pad that came with it, and I'm going to ink blend on this cardstock. I usually do not grab a 110-pound cardstock when I ink blend. I tend to like to blend on Distress Heavystock, but this is what came in the kit, so I wanted to use it. And I was not looking for a perfect blend, although the longer this sets, it smooths out. So my finished card does not look as patchy as it'll look when I'm done ink blending here, because like I said, as it dries, it smooths out and looks great. But I did not want a perfectly seamless blended panel, so I was totally fine using the 110-pound white cardstock. So again, just sprayed on some water, wiped my glass surface off, cleaned so well, and now I am going to use that Snow Much Thanks sentiment again. I do see if I can use the longer one, because at this time is when I'm realizing, oh, I am using this sentiment twice, but the longer sentiment just was too wide to put it on this the card. So I am just gonna get that nice and even. I use my Misty has a grid on that lid. I just use it to make sure it's nice and straight. And I put an extra magnet to hold my cardstock into place. And again, I did make sure that this panel was totally dry and all embossing powder slid off of it before I stamped on it, so that I did not ruin my panel with embossing powder everywhere. So stamping it twice, and then just going to use that silver embossing powder once again. And this silver embossing powder came in a different card kit from Simon that I got previously. So I'm going to clean that up nice and good, because I'm going to turn it around and need to place it, so I don't want it to ruin my background panel. So I am using my sentiment just to make sure I get it placed exactly where I want it placed, and also going to use the grid lines. And that's why my head's in the way, because I did need to be right over the top of it to make sure everything lined up nice and well. And I'm using the Cat Scrappiness anti-static powder tool. I like it because it has a good amount of powder that comes out. I'd rather have too much and have to take a brush and brush a little bit of the excess away than not be able to get enough on there. So I like the amount of powder that comes out of this tool. And we're going to stamp this and heat set this as well. And you can really see it change from the dull powder to the nice shiny finished image. That's how you know your embossing powder is nice and set. And now let's see what we want to do with this sentiment. I could have just had a 1-layer card and stamped it directly on there, but I wanted it popped up a little bit. So I'm going to grab me another scratch piece of black cardstock and going to stamp right there. And I'm sorry, that is out of the screen just a little bit, but I am just taking that long Snow Much Thanks sentiment stamp and putting it right up against the edge of my Misty there. So I'm only having to trim off the ends and the one edge. And I am gonna stamp this, emboss this with the silver embossing powder from Simon. So I just barely tap off the extra. I don't really like to flick my cardstock, because whenever I flick it, I always find that a lot of the powder goes flying off of the image that I want the powder to stick to. So I just kind of lightly tap it to get any of that extra off. You can also use a dry paintbrush to remove any powder that is somewhere where you don't want it to be. Just make sure your paintbrush is dry and it just flicks right off. So because I used anti-static powder, I did take my microfiber cloth when it cooled down and wiped that anti-static powder off of my black cardstock. I did that on my previous sentiment as well, so that doesn't show. Gonna use some little black foam squares to pop this up. I realized that this sentiment, I did not need foam squares from end to end. Don't want to waste them, so I just kind of have my sentiment sitting there so I know where I need to put my little foam squares to be able to pop it up. I do like to make sure I use enough of my foam squares or my foam tape or whatever I'm using for that dimension to try to cover the back of what I'm trying to pop up so it doesn't get smushed or bent or cracked going through the mail. So I'm just going to eyeball this one because I can kind of use my 2 images that I stamped to see where that sentiment needs to go, because I want it right in the middle of those. Flipping my panel over and just snipping off that excess black there. And then we are going to grab a top fold heavyweight card base from Simon Says Stamp. Use my Barely Arts precision glue here. I love the tip on this. I've never had it clog. I just always put the needle back in it, and I love this glue. I do prefer to use liquid adhesive. I hardly ever use a tape runner. I held that down in place and let that start to set. And then I'm just, again, reaching for those Pink Fresh Studio iridescent drops and going to place a few of those above and below my beautiful embossed image and sentiment here. And I kept it pretty simple. I just did 5. They do say that an odd number is more pleasing to the eye, but in the end, I just do whatever works good, but I do try to count and see if I've done an odd number. And so this worked perfect for that. Gonna funnel these back into the package, and this is my last of the 3 cards I made using the January 2023 card kit from Simon Says Stamp. So here are my 3 cards. I hope you enjoyed the cards I made today. I hope you see the value in these monthly subscriptions and card kits. And I very much appreciate you stopping by. We'll see you next time. Thanks.